turnout. We were hoping to see a lot of folks tonight. I'm Mark Oliver. I'm Chief of Fisheries from Little Rock for Game and Fish Commission. I want to start out by thanking Superintendent Moore for allowing us to hold the meeting here and for the help we've had setting up today. They brought in a lot of chairs, and we sure appreciate that. I want to start out by introducing Judge Bolton, Terry Bolton in the back. Probably everybody knows he's very interested in this issue. Before we get going, I don't know if there's anybody else that's in elected officials here or that would like to be introduced. Apparently not. So I want to introduce the Game and Fish folks that are here. And I want to start out with a special person, Commissioner Eamon Mahoney. He represents this area, the whole state, but this area in particular on the commission. On this far end is Chris Racy, Assistant Chief of Fisheries over the management section. This is Mike Armstrong. He's Deputy Director for Game and Fish. This is Jim Goodhart. He's our Chief of Fiscal. He's our main lawyer for the agency. Dale Gunner is our Chief Engineer for the agency. And Les Claybrook is your biologist from this area, the fellow that manages Lake Erling. And first off, I wanted to say that thanks again for everybody for coming. This meeting was intended to be for Lake Erling landowners, because it'll become clear here in a little bit about why we needed to meet with the landowners. We know there's a huge amount of interest in this whole issue here, and so I know there's probably people who may not be landowners. Would you mind if you're not a landowner raising your hand so we can get an idea? I mean, you're welcome to be here. We're glad to have you. We know there's a lot of things, rumors and information's going around that you want to check on, you're concerned about. And so I'm guessing we've got the majority of the folks in here are landowners, and I'm glad to see it. One of the main thing we're here to talk about is the willingness of landowners to provide game and fish flowage easement from 225 feet above mean sea level on Lake Erling to 228, which is the 100-year, top of the 100-year floodplain. A little bit of history for those of you, I think probably everyone here may know it even better than me. And I'm glad to say there's a lot of, for instance, Mike Armstrong has had a lot of dealings with this, and I'm hoping that when we get to the question time, that if there's something I can't answer, that one of these folks up here will be able to answer it. If we can't, then we'll get you an answer later. Anyway, the history is, most of you know, Lake Erling was constructed in 1956. Primarily, IP did it to provide water for the Spring Hill paper mill. The paper mill went out of business in 1978, and IP really has no reason to have the lake anymore. They don't have a need for it, so they've been interested in divesting themselves of it. And I would like to ask if is there anybody from IP that made it to the meeting?
Ernest Cook is here.
Pardon?
Ernest Cook is here somewhere.
Ernest Cook? Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Retired. Okay. Thank you for coming. Anyway, there are a lot of issues, of course, but this has been talked about between Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and IP for quite a while. There's a lot of interest in having the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission take the lake. IP, as I said, they don't really need it, and they're having to maintain it, and which is not what businesses like to do, spend money when they don't need to. So the issues that we're here to talk about is the willingness of landowners to donate or sell land for an easement to that strip of land I described. And our issues that we're dealing with right now, which we haven't reached any conclusion on yet, I want to say right up front that it's our goal to be as inobtrusive to the uses of that flowage easement as we possibly can and still protect the long-term interest of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and the state in the event that structures in that easement got flooded. And a little bit later, I'm going to ask Mr. Goodhart to address that a little bit of the issues that face us based on the research he's seen. But the main thing I'd like to give you right now is that we are trying to figure out a way to do this if, in fact, we do end up with the lake. This is a critical part of it, that would be as inobtrusive as possible, that the activities that we've all of us up here have been called about could be, might be able to be done. The biggest issue of all of those is whether you can construct a human habitation inside that easement between 25 and 28 feet. There's been discussion about requiring that any subfloor be above the 228 or maybe even higher. We also are going to discuss a little bit the land use policy that we have on all Arkansas game and fish lakes and how they might apply here if we ended up with the lake, and what we try to manage on the lake and regulate once it's our lake. And I don't know, we have 25 or 30 lakes that belong to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and all the ones that have, riparian owners around them, we have this land use policy, which I know some of you are already familiar with. We're trying right now to apply our land use policy fairly and consistently all across the state on all our lakes so that everybody knows what can be permitted and what can't be permitted. The main issue is that land that belongs to the Game and Fish Commission, therefore the public, and it has to be managed as public land. And so the land use policy, if it goes into effect, we have specs for structures like boathouses, boat docks, fishing piers, boat slides, that we require any new construction to meet those specs. So the old stuff that's out there that's in good shape would be grandfathered in and would only need to, if it was going to be replaced or needed a major repair. So I know a lot of people think that maybe, if we got it, everything would have to be changed, but we grandfather in those structures that are safe and in good condition. And I'm going to open this up to brief questions. We've got a lot of people here, and we're not going to be able to talk for a long time on any given subject. Hopefully, pretty quickly, we'll be answering some of the questions that everybody may have. And I'm probably going to just kind of... Okay. We're probably going to have, when we get to that point, I'll have to kind of go in a pattern up through there and give everybody that can a chance to talk. We want to try to get out of here by 9 if we can. We've got a lot of folks here. Mike wants to say something.
Yeah, again, Mike Armstrong, I'm Deputy Director with Arkansas Game and Fish, and I wanted to kind of clarify something that Mark started saying, because I was one of the initial contacts and began the initial discussions with International Paper when they came to us and said, we're looking to divest this lake, is Game and Fish interested? And so I've got a little more background to add, and I want to explain why we're even talking about a flowage easement tonight, because right now there is not one. Of course, the lake's been there since the 50s. Many of y'all have been landowners around the lake, and so suddenly why has this become important to us? IP approached us, 10 years ago with this concept of taking over the lake. And it is a big lake. If the state should own this lake, it would be the largest state-owned lake by Fish and Wildlife Agency in the nation. And we have the second and third ones right now, Lake Conway and the White Oak. So it is a big project. And there's been some comment about how long it's taken, because this is a very complicated transaction, because IP does not own all the property underneath Lake Erling. So yes, we're being very deliberative and very careful, making sure that we know what's at stake here. We told the international paper that we were very interested in taking over the lake. Our bottom line concern here is we want to keep Lake Erling open as a public fishery and to be managed by the game fish as a public fishery. So, and that's what we told IP from the beginning. No matter who owns it, if we take it or it doesn't work out with us and another entity takes it on, we want to ensure that it's always going to be open just as it is now for public fishing, and that game fish will be involved with its management, because we think that Erling can be an outstanding fishery. It's just got that capabilities in it, and many of y'all already know that. So we told IP three things. Said, yes, we're very interested. We signed a letter that said we are interested in progressing further, but we got three things we want to know. One, we wanted a survey of the entire boundary of the lake, because like anybody, if you're acquiring property, you want to know what you're getting. We wanted to know what we're getting with that. So we asked IP to do a survey around the lake. We asked them to do an assessment on the dam itself, that we want to make sure that the dam was safe, that it operated correctly, that there was no maintenance issues with the lake, so that we knew what we were getting when we took on this huge structure. And again, you're talking about a lake as big as Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs. I mean, it's a big structure. So we wanted to know, is the dam in good standing? How much is it going to cost us to operate that? And the third thing that we were very interested in is that we wanted to know how the lake responded to high rainfall events, flood events, if you would. And so IP conducted a study through an engineering firm in Little Rock, FTN, and they did an analysis of the lake, how the lake pool level responds to different flood events. And Mark referred to the 100-year flood event. That's not a flood or a rainfall event that occurs every 100 years. It's actually a rainfall event that has a 1% chance of occurring every year. Well, in the past decade or so, we've had like 5 or 6 of them. It's just the nature of what's going on with weather patterns. It just happens to be in a very rainy type of cycle. So it does occur. All of y'all have seen Lake Erling come up and go down. IP owns up to the 225 elevation level. Okay? Now that's mean sea level, mean feet sea level, mean feet above sea level, trying to get my words right. Normal pool on the lake is 223. So they have a 2-foot buffer on their ownership that lake can fluctuate in. Everybody in here knows if you've been around the lake, it gets above 225. So when it goes off 225, our interest is who are we flooding if we should own that lake and are now responsible for its operation if it gets above 225. Well, the FTN engineering firm came back and told us that over a period of history, you can expect Lake Erling to get above elevation 225 every 5 years. It has that 20% chance. It's not going to happen every year, but every year it has a 20% chance of getting at 225. They told us that up to again, I'll use the 100-year floodplain level, because that's kind of a common benchmark, a common way of terming it, was at between 227 and 228. So when we took this to our commission, what their first response is that to protect both the agency and the landowners around the lake, that they wanted an agreement between the commission and the landowners, hence the flowage easement, that water was going to encroach on there, and that if it did, then the landowner was at risk for anything that was in that easement. And what Mr. Goodhart will tell you tonight, that typical easements do have some building restrictions on it. And so he'll cover those. But that was our interest of why that 225 to 228 level was important. It doesn't mean that the game and fish will own it and we're going to start applying some sort of land use policy restrictions about what you pick tables and docks and flagpoles and buildings. So, no, and it would still remain in private ownership. It still remain your land. It just would have an agreement, if you will, an easement that water will encroach on there at some routine or some frequency that is dependent on rainfall events. Now, easements are legal documents. They carry with the property itself, so that when you sell that property, that easement will go on with the property to the new owner. But that's the only way it works, because if you sell, you know how often the property's going to sell around Lake Erling. We don't want to have to renegotiate that agreement every time you sell your piece of property. It's just incumbent. So it runs with the title on the property. And it gives the game and fish of the state of Arkansas the assurance that we can operate the lake as a fishery, as a recreational lake, and that we have an agreement between us and the landowner that water's going to go up there. And yes, we can't definitively tell you tonight what those restrictions on the easement will be, because we don't know ourselves. The ones that we have looked at and are reviewing tend to all run that you cannot have a residence below or within the easement. So that, but any other type of structure, whether it be outbuildings, picnic tables, docks, whatever you want to put down there, if you want to put it there, then it's your risk to have it there. But the typical easement that we've been reviewing, and probably Mr. Goodhart will cover, does have the building restrictions on a permanent residence. And that would make sense. Who wants to build, your house where you're going to have some 20% chance of flooding every year? I'm not sure people want to face that. So anyway, I wanted to give that kind of context and background to why we're even talking about flowage easements, and why up to this point IP has not seen fit that they needed that kind of assurance. But from the state of Arkansas and our perspective, our commission has said yes, they want some protection that if we own that lake, that there is that agreement in place about water encroaching on that easement property. Because again, Lake Erling is going to change. If we take it on ownership and we start managing it as a destination fishery and stocking bass, crappie, and doing habitat improvements and start managing water levels so that it's going to attract people to come and visit Lake Erling. IP's already sold a lot of the property over on the west side. Y'all are aware of that. It's likely to be subdivided and built upon. So there's changes in the mix, whether we have the lake or who does, about people wanting to build around it. And again, I'll go back to whatever the outcome. Our bottom line has always been we want to keep Lake Erling open as a public fishery, available to the residents of Arkansas to come fish and enjoy. We want game and fish to have the ability to manage it effectively as such. And as Mark said, we're going to try to answer questions. This is a big crowd. We don't want to be here after 1 o'clock in the morning, so we ask that you give us some considered information that way. The other thing is, we do ask that if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and be recognized. If you want to tell us who you are and where you live, that's all fine. That's really up to you. And we're going to try to limit like 2 minutes per person, so we can kind of get through this thing, so that maybe by 9 o'clock we can start breaking up. And of course, we'll hang around for. Okay. Judge Bolden had his hand raised in the back. Let me go ahead and recognize him, Judge.
Mike, can you explain the difference between building a habitable structure relative to creating? The base of that foundation is below 228, but the base of the subfloor structure is above 228, so that's called a line.
Right. The question was, if you heard it, he said, again, using the typical example that we have seen on flowage easements where there's a restriction on building a residence, Judge Bolton was asking if you raise the floor level, the living level above 228, is that acceptable? To me, it is. But Judge, I'll have to be honest with you. That is yet to be determined, and Mr. Goodhart may speak to that a little differently. But yes, I think the interest is no habitable floor level below 228. Mark?
I'm going to ask Mr. Goodhart if he would address some of those issues about the flowage easements he's been researching, some of the cases that have occurred because of flooding, and let him give you our legal perspective of what might be maybe the ideal situation for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission would be if there was nothing in that flowage easement. But we've already said that we want to try to be as intrusive with it as we can, so we may end up, if we could figure a way of settling for less than the ideal situation from an agency standpoint.
Excuse me, please. I like to say, my name's Ernest Cook. I managed the lake 19 years. It did go up every few years. IP, to my knowledge, never had a lawsuit from any of these people or any other landowner around the lake.
My name's Jim Goodhart. As y'all explained, I'm the chief counsel for the Game and Fish Commission. One of the things that everybody in this room that owns land or leases land does before you sign on the dotted line is you do some due diligence. You want to make sure that whatever you're getting is in fact going to be yours. You want to make sure the title is going to be good. You want to make sure that whoever sold it to you had title, and you just don't want to take a pig in the poke. And as an employee for the Game and Fish Commission, we are representing you and the taxpayers. And so our job when IP approaches Game and Fish is to look at what it is that IP wants to pass to the Game and Fish Commission for us to take over and have the responsibility to manage. And that would include the dam and the spillway and the reservoir itself. And as Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Oliver mentioned to you, IP generally has ownership of the bed of the lake up to the 225 mean sea level. In some instances, they don't own that. And from my understanding, they have a flowage easement that goes up to that 225. But they don't actually own every bit of what goes to 225. By the way, the United States of America owns some of the acreage that's underwater. That in 1956, the Corps of Engineers had some of that acreage, and they allowed international paper to flood it, essentially. So some of it belongs to the United States. Some of it does belong to international paper. Some of it belongs to other individuals, and they have given flowage easements up to the 225 level to have water inundate their land. And so we're looking at what it is that would come to the Game and Fish Commission. Again, we have to do that on all the taxpayers' behalf so that we know what we're taking and we do right by it. And so, as Mr. Armstrong said, most situations where our agency has lakes, we generally have had a buffer around the lake and or a flowage easement so that as that lake rises and falls, the flowage easement is to let water be there temporarily until the lake comes back down. Some lakes are just like a bathtub, and they're going to, the water comes in, unless you get it out quickly, it's going to rise, and that's just Mother Nature. This lake has a dam that was constructed that's about 4/5 of a mile long dam. It has a spillway that's designed to hold water at a certain level at about the 223 level, and after that it goes over the spillway. But as you heard, there's going to be, with Mother Nature, that water is going to rise and it's got to go somewhere, and the flowage easement, the concept of the flowage easement is someone retains ownership of that, but the grantee of the flowage easement, which in this instance would be the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, has a right to let water rise onto the easement and sit there until such time as it can come back down, as the lake recedes. And so that's needed pretty much everywhere that there's a lake. And of course, all up and down all of the major rivers in the country that are navigable, there's flowage easements, as to make the river navigable, to hold water at a elevation where shipping can float up and down. Most of these flowage easements, when they're purchased, let's say by the United States government or by the state, most of these flowage easements are designed to where when the someone or seek compensation when their property is damaged, where they're affected by a flood. I personally lived through 2 floods down in Louisiana, and I know what it's like to be displaced. There was nothing I could do in that instance other than just take my belongings, dry them out, and keep doing that until I got to dry land, essentially. But people do file lawsuits, unfortunately, over actions that a lot of times are just, they're linked to Mother Nature, frankly. You can do the very best job you can to design a dam, a spillway, and evacuate water as fast as you reasonably can, but sometimes Mother Nature hands you a situation that, even under the best circumstances, that water's got to go somewhere, and some people that are at a lower elevation are going to be affected. And again, that's what we have to try to plan for, and that's why the easement is there in order to let this water go somewhere temporarily. Now, what would the flowage easement entail? What I was trying to tell you there originally, and around other lakes, and I think if you lived on a lake that was managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, they would probably have you sign a flowage easement that would say you could not construct a permanent structure, permanent dwelling in the flowage easement. And that's the ideal, is that you don't put something permanent in that, because as Mr. Armstrong said, once every 5 years there's going to be some water there. Once every 100 years, it's going to be a lot of water there. And you just don't know when it's coming. But the ideal is not to have something of a permanent nature. Yes, you can put personal property, things that are less permanent, satellite dishes, picnic tables, decks, your garden, anything else you want, you can put in there. But as far as a permanent inhabitable structure, normally flowage easements don't allow those. The Game and Fish Commission is making no determination at this point what restrictions would go in these flowage easements. I know that's probably foremost in your mind when you come here tonight, is I'm being asked by the Game and Fish Commission in a letter, would I deed or sign or donate a flowage easement? Well, you need to know what that's going to entail, what kind of restriction that is. And I'm telling you, we haven't made the decision as to what would be the land use restriction in that. And we want to dialogue and make sure we hear from you, go back, visit with the management, and determine what that should be. But I can tell you that in the ideal sense, there's no construction of a permanent nature. What's in the non-ideal sense? Could there be something on pilings and get the floor level up above the 228 elevation? Perhaps that we could. I will say this, International Paper has sold some of the land that surrounds Lake Erling here in 2002. And when they sold it, the land purchaser had to sign in the agreement that there would be no structures that would have a floor level below 228 plus 3. No floor level below 231. Okay, that was put in the deeds that IP sold to a land developer in 2002. And so that was a restriction that International Paper saw fit to pass on. So what I'm trying to tell you is we can't tell you as you leave here tonight what land restrictions would be in this easement. What we can tell you is we're going to take information about what is already out there, what you may have already built. If your home is in below 228, we need to know that. If you've got decks below that, that's probably going to be fine. But as far as for the future, what could be constructed and how it could be constructed is something we need to look at. There may be some instances where people could construct in the flowage easement, get the flooring up above the 228, and probably like International Paper said, 228 plus 3. That means you could qualify for flood insurance. But something less than that, being able to be at the ground level with the residents below 228, you're in harm's way, frankly.
How do we find out what the
that's an excellent question, and that is what our agency has asked international papers to help us with a survey and to help let us see, one, where the 225 elevation runs around the perimeter of the lake, and secondly, where the 228 elevation runs. I hate to tell you, there's not been a survey that's done that. There's not been one we're talking about 120 miles of shoreline, so that is an expensive survey, but that's the kind of information we all need. And I can tell you that we're looking forward to that.
I see a lot of hands up, and I'd like to ask everybody not to we're going to try to do this in an orderly way, and so if you'll hang on to your questions, we'll get to you, I promise. And I just let Jim finish, and if you have anybody.
What I want to leave you with is the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission is serious about its due diligence. It's serious about not trying to take anything more from landowners than really what would be needed to make sure that we can manage the lake and not incur liability for flooding above, between the 225, 228 level. And also make sure that essentially we give you back the information that you need in order to help make a determination if you're willing to provide that flowage easement. And I'll be honest with you though, if our agency cannot secure the kind of flowage easement that needs to be done around the lake, the agency will have to make a decision whether to undertake this on behalf of the public and incur the risk. And so that's just a real issue.
Dale, does he have anything for Les? Okay, I know that this gentleman had his hand up early.
My name is Jesse Johnson. I do own property on the lake. Sir, you only told me one thing when I was talking to you. You don't take the lake. I heard that. This gentleman over here talking about easements for it, but I have one other question. You come here to tell us that you're going to take 3 boats and build the lake, our property. What did you bring to give up? You're going to tell us what kind of boathouse we can do, what kind of field we can build, how long we can leave the boat in the water. What did you bring up to that 3 boats?
Go ahead and repeat the question. Make sure, can y'all hear me? Okay. I'm going to repeat the question, make sure I captured it. Because what you are hearing is that the game and fish is going to take the lake. Okay, well, hold on. That game and fish is going to take the lake, and y'all wonder what we are bringing to the equation, I guess, or bringing. Okay, well, first of all, I want to make clear, IP approached us on this. They said, are y'all interested in acquiring the lake from us? Because they still, the lake is privately owned by a private corporation right now. And so they are under no obligation to even have the lake there. Yeah, they could, since they don't need it for anything else, there's nothing stopping them from opening the bottom sluice gates and draining it. The only thing that they are required to do is maintain the structure for flood control. It's original flood control purpose under the Corps of Engineer easement. Now, IP's not here, so I can't speak to them, but they have never indicated that they were going to travel down that route. I think by everything that I've communicated, they are very interested in seeing that this lake remains available for public fishing. So what we bring to it is one, if the community is interested in having the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission either own or control or manage the lake for public fishing and keep it open for public fishing. That is, like I spoke before, that is a bottom line interest. If we own it, then as Mr. Goodhart said, we are responsible to the public and for the taxpayers to make sure that we know what we're giving, that it is in clean order, and that there is a protection to the taxpayers of Arkansas from liability because that lake will fluctuate. So that's the only thing we're talking about in the flowage easement. There's been some confusion, and I want to make sure that we know a distinction. If this transaction takes place, Game and Fish Commission will only own up to 225 at the part that the International Paper owns. We won't own the property in the flowage easement. So the only restrictions on that are what Mr. Goodhart talked about, are any building restrictions with particular interest on the habitable residences. Everything else is still owned by the private landowner for your enjoyment and your use. We're not making any determination, or do we have any intent of ever restricting how you want to enjoy your property for any of, whoever you want to let on that property for whatever purpose you want to, like, if you want to put a garden on it, picnic tables, a deck, all that kind of stuff. We have no interest in that, and do we want an interest in that? Our whole interest is again, to protect the taxpayers' investment that present company accepted. Somebody said nobody's ever sued IP over this, granted, but this is a very litigious world anymore, and so we have to do our due diligence that protecting, again, for your benefit in the state of Arkansas, is that there is that flowage is in place for that water approaching. So I hope I answered that question. That was a lengthy one.
You control the lake, you set it to 228 line by closing the gate. You keep it to 228 to let everybody out at 225. So what did you give up?
One thing that I can add to what Game and Fish would bring would be maintenance of the dam, maintenance of the access areas, and right now, maintenance of the dam is about somewhere around $35,000 a year, plus all the rest. So there'd be a sizable fiscal responsibility for the Game and Fish Commission if we take it over to actually take care of the lake. So you're talking about money and personnel time and all that. Okay, those folks have had their hands up.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. The easement now, or the ownership now is 225, and 3 foot above that is the finished floor grade, not 231. I don't know.
I didn't hear that whole question.
Mr. Goodhart said that it was 225, 223, 225, 228, and 231, but as far as I know, in all my deeds, the ownership is to 225, and the finished floor grade is 228, and that's it. I just want to make sure that was clear before we went very far.
I think the example I was telling you was that in a deed done in 2002 by International Paper, quite a bit of their surrounding land around the lake, they passed on to the surrounding landowner property, but they also included in that nothing could be built below. Let me see, if you're below the 228, between 228 and 225, they indicated to the landowner that purchased the property that they would have to have their flooring raised to 228 plus 3 foot. Now, I'm not saying that that's, in actuality, there's a legal requirement. I just said as an example that that's what International Paper required of the landowner that took the property from International Paper.
And that's where we're disagreeing, because I've got that. I was a predecessor in title too. It went from IP to Dr. York, and then from there out. And that deed only went to 228 with finished floor level. That was it. So I don't want people to start thinking anything different. The man that did the title work and did the deeds is here, so I mean, I just don't want people to get confused about what's there now.
Yeah, my question is, I believe Mark was the first speaker. You said that we're talking about raising the flood zone, and that Arkansas Game and Fish is one of those who is interested in donating our land or selling it to y'all. Then the second speaker said that you are not going to take the land that it was just going to be a legal definition of that 3 foot. It's one word, which is it? And then my second question is, if y'all raise the flood zone up to 228, and that's going to change all the insurance policies, and some people's insurance policies may not cover that to that. And if they have loans on that land, that's going to revoke the loans or make somebody have to pay that deal. How's Arkansas Game and Fish going to take care of that?
Okay, let me make sure I understood the two questions. You're asking that, and again, I want to make a distinction. 225 and below, if transacting goes first, Game and Fish would own that property. 225 to 228, the land stays with the landowner, but there would be an easement on it from to Game and Fish that water would be able to encroach up on that level with some whatever period, just a frequency, Mother Nature prescribes to that. So the land would stay with the private landowner. Now, I think that was your first question.
My first question was that, but also was which one of y'all are right. Mark said in his opening statement that y'all are going to try to raise up 228, and you want to know if we want to donate our land or sell our land. You're saying it's going to stay the same. So which is the proper answer to that?
Are you asking if there would be compensation to the landowner once the easement?
I guess you just can't understand my southern slang. The question is, y'all are telling us two different things. Mark said that want to know if we wanted to donate our land or that we'd be compensated, and you're saying that we're going to keep our land, you're just going to change the legal description of what can be done if it is flooded where y'all would be not held liable. So we're getting two different statements, I guess you'd say there. That's my question. Which statement is the true statement?
Okay. When you put an easement that we're contemplating here, the land ownership, if you're the property owner, would stay in your name. You would grant to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission permission, if you would, I'll use that word, to flood that property on some frequency whenever it occurs, and that you would assume the risk of that water being on you. You would not come and claim damages against the Game and Fish. Game and Fish wouldn't own your property, and you would still have all the rights and privileges of that ownership, except those that would be restricted out by the easement, which may be, as Mr. Goodhart described, you couldn't build your home below 228, okay? You would still own it, but there would be some reservation against it. And so the question is, obviously from our standpoint, we would like people to donate that easement to us, because it does have value, because you're giving up something when you sign this easement. You're giving up, whatever the building restrictions are in it. But again, don't confuse that you are still the property owner of that property. Okay, and you had a second question.
You remember what the second question was?
No.
If you raise our flood zone up to 228, then the insurance companies are going to come in and reevaluate what the flood zone is because y'all raised the flood zone. Therefore, some of this land that's here is not going to be insurable because we'll be in the flood zone. Then is Arkansas Game and Fish going to compensate us if the bank comes in and wants to call our note in because now it's not insurable?
Well, the Game and Fish Commission is not changing the flood zone. The flood zone exists there now. We are just recognizing it. Yeah.
Let me ask y'all a question. We just toured around the lake a little bit here today, and it looked like to me that when the water comes on your land now, that is strictly a result of rain. They're not managing this lake to raise or lower that. It's happening as an act of God, of nature. It's either rain falls, it comes in the lake comes up, it goes over the spillway, the water comes back down. There's no human influence that's changing how high or how low that goes, is there? The gates in the dam, and that takes enough water off to significantly affect how much it goes up.
If that is up there, it's opening when it's time. Game and Fish Commission wants on the front of this, and the reason for the meeting and everything else is for everybody to have exactly what we're starting out on tonight with this question and answer session. Everybody to have a clear idea of how the lake's going to be run, which in all probability is the way IP ran it for years. We want there to be a clear understanding as to the legal rights of the party when this water fluctuation occurs. And the time to get all that done is in advance. And so everybody knows what we're taking on, what you're taking on, and if we reach an agreement, we'll go forward. If we can't reach an agreement, then we won't. I mean, it's that simple. We're trying to work through that. But it is complicated. This is a big lake. There are lots of landowners. There are lots of deeds involved. There are some questions right now as to whether legal rights exist to flow water over all the lands that water is now flowed over. It's not correct, then? Some question about that. We've got to work through all that and all those transactions. And this is the first step in an attempt to communicate with everybody and to get a clear understanding. Most of you are familiar with websites now. We will have a website set up where you can input questions to us and we can come back and forth to you, and there will be dialogue going on through this whole process.
We want phone numbers, sir.
And, you know, everybody's going to have to be patient. It's going to take a long time. But we want everybody to understand how it's going to operate if we take it over. And that's what we're starting.
Thank you, Commissioner Mahoney. No, the land use policy would not apply to the easement area, only to the water, only to the land of 225 and below. That's what the Game and Fish Commission would have. This would not apply. The land use policy. Right, it does not apply. Well, okay, Chris has got it.
I own the title company in Louisville. I wrote most of the title work, all the property around the lake. And I'm agreeing with Greg about the 228 plus 225 plus 3 feet, not 228 plus 3 feet.
It's 228. The easement would go from 225 to 228, which is the 100-year flood rule.
You know, most of the people in here are already property owners. We're not looking to build something new. I want to know about my house. What if my house is in your 228 feet? What happens to me in my house?
Clear up confusion. The Game and Fish Commission is not planning to change the water surface level of the lake any different than it's been in the past. The only reason that we are requesting the 228 elevation for the flowage easement is that the hydrology and hydraulic study has shown that's where the 100-year flood elevation can rise to, and we're asking for that so that we would be released from any liability when one of these acts of God occurs that would cause it to flood to that level. We're not talking about changing the way the lake has been operated and managed. You would assume no more risks than you have assumed in the past. All we're asking for is to be held harmless when that event occurs.
To maybe further answer that question about if you already have something in 225 to 228 area that would be the easement, we'd have to try to figure out a way to grandfather all those kinds of structures in. Chris?
I have property on the lake. I have a
very serious question about, for example, if you have an easement at the 228 level, okay, my property's out to the 225. Lake's washing off my property all the way up to the 228 and keeps going. I've read your regs and stuff on the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission lakes, and it's pretty prohibitive as far as structures, seawalls being one of them. And I have a concern about that, and I want you to address it.
Okay, again, if you looked at our land use policy, there's been some reporting in the paper, land use policy. First of all, that land use policy applies to Arkansas Game and Fish Commission-owned lakes that were acquired and developed in a whole different context than we're looking at Lake Erling. There's been no decision at all about the use and application of the land use policy on Lake Erling. If it did apply at all, it would only apply for those properties that we would actually own, 225 and below. So I want to make sure that if you got that land use policy off our website, throw it out, because we're not referring to that on the easement. We're talking about something totally different. And there's been actually no decision of whether we even use it in the sense of Lake Erling. Because that policy was built when we buy a piece of land, we own it all, we put a dam on there, fill the lake up, and then people come and build around what we already own. We got a totally different situation here where we're going into a situation where the lake exists and the homes exist. So we're going to have to rethink that whole situation out. So
That means that if this easement goes further, you won't prohibit somebody from building a seawall, especially if it's coming up anyway their property. Well, it's on the property, anyway the property, but falls in that 228 easement.
Well, but if the seawall falls above or is built above 225, no, we would have no interest in that. I'm not sure why you would build it up that high. But what you're referring to is on our lakes that we own and control, that we don't prohibit seawalls. We simply want to know when you're going to build them, because oftentimes our property line is described by the pool level of the lake. And so if you change it at all by building a seawall, you change our property line. So we permit seawalls on game and fish lakes. If we went forward with that in this situation on Lake Erling, and you built a seawall, we own the property, we own the lake, and you wanted a seawall 225 and below, our current land use policy would allow that under permit from us, which simply means we come out and we want to make sure that it's built to certain specs and certain conditions so that you're not harming the lake. Because again, that's our basic interest. We don't want something that's going to harm disturb the legal description of the property or harm the water quality in the lake.
Am I correct that you are changing the 225 100-year floodline to 228? That's your proposal? Because it's on file in the courthouse that 225 is a 100-year floodplain line. Judge Frank Scroggins detailed that before he died, and it's in our land description.
That you would have to show us that, because the FTN Associates did the hydrology and hydraulic analysis that established the 228 flood elevation for the 100-year event. There's no evidence that we have that shows 225 as a 100-year floodplain. If you would send us a copy of that, then we'll look at that and see what it says. But right now, 228 is the only evidence that we have for a 100-year flood event.
Yes, sir, I have a question for you. What did you say that game and fish would own at what level? What level would the game and fish own? You say if you take the lake.
Yeah, 225, which is where IP owns right now.
You can't be sued for that above 225, sir, in a flood. You'll only be sued for what you own, and you know that, and I do too. And I've given easements before, and I've lived to regret it. So
I mean, you're getting me sued for something you don't own. And to give you an easement, and you then have to come back and ask you to do something, if we want to put something on it, doesn't make sense to me, I'm sorry.
You can be sued for what you do. And if you're in control of the lake and have some influence on whether that water goes up above 225 to 228, there's always a question that can end up in court.
Why can't you just sign a waiver?
Yeah.
That's all you got.
That's real close to what you'd be doing. That's real close to what you'd be doing. Because all the flowage easement does is give the party that gets it the right to flow water over that land up to that level. Now, waiver's another word for that same principle.
Why do you say that?
Well, but I mean, those things can be worked through to everybody's satisfaction. I'm not concerned about that.
I did use the word permission instead of easement, so that sort of thing.
Okay, I have a three-part question. Will there be any fees on people that have land, game and fishing, for landowners, y'all take over the lake? Number two, in y'all's possession of this land, if you have landowners that do not want to sell or sign an easement, will you use eminent domain law principle to obtain that easement? And thirdly, what prevents you from raising the usual level of that lake to help out all these local water systems and have the same thing to Lake Erling that just happened to Lake Columbia, and you make that a watershed for all these municipal water systems, and y'all end up collecting a big fee on it?
Well, the answer to the first part was the fees. The only fees that we charge on any of our lakes, and like Mike said, that hadn't been worked out how the land use policy would apply, are for boat docks and structures that are built on the lake on public property.
But there is usually a fee on game and fishing on lakes.
No, except for those permits. We don't have, landowners don't have a fee just to be on the lake. Well, there are, I mean, to have those structures, there is a permit. Well, I wasn't trying to.
Mark, can you repeat the question?
What was part two?
Mark, can you repeat the question?
If you have landowners that do not want to participate in this lease agreement, will they invoke their power of eminent domain as a government agency to obtain it without your permission? That's the second part. The third part is there's nothing to restrict them from raising this level up, making this a sellable watershed for these water municipalities that got in trouble this last year and like to pull Lake Columbia completely dry, and y'all go by and look.
I defer part two to Jim, but part three is we don't have any kind of agreements like that with any of our other lakes. All I can do is say that there, in our discussion, there's never been any discussion of that, although Lafayette County and Columbia County conservation districts are looking at that kind of possibility.
All right, on the eminent domain, no, I mean, our commission's been pretty clear that we don't acquire land by eminent domain. So it would be a change from the past policy of the commission to do that, and I don't anticipate that.
If I refuse the lease to you, you're not going to invoke eminent domain on my property.
Well, I can't say never, you know, obviously, but there is no, I mean, that's not even in the equation right now.
It's always in the equation in public forum. You're trying to blow smoke here.
Well, again, I mean, this is an opening information exchange and dialogue of what's going to be a long process. And so that's why I can't speak for a commission. They could change that. And second thing was, let me answer the third question even before I forget what I'm going to say. No, we have no plans to change the operation of the lake because it would change that 100-year floodplain levels. If the lake we would change the operation of the lake or elevate it, we would have, tonight's meeting would be useless because we'd be talking about a floodplain level, 100-year flood mark that's above 228. So it'd make no sense for us to even contemplate changing that. So we have no interest in changing that.
You're talking about 2 more feet of permanent flood pool? Whoa, I'm just asking. You're talking about 2 more feet of a permanent flood pool? Okay, I mean, that's what you'd have to have a reliable water supply.
You said nothing prevents you from doing that, going back to the legislature to get that changed. It happens all the time.
I can tell you there's no agreement, no intention to do that. One of the purposes of these meetings is so that everybody will know by the end of this process exactly what game and fish intends to do. We will tell you that by the end. I can tell you right now, there's been no talking to it that I'm aware of. Now, and you're right, things can always change. And in a time when water's as short as it is, there's going to be lots of pressure from lots of people to get a hold of water. And but that's something we just all going to have to deal with. We're going to be open with you about what we're going to do and what we have to have if we're going to take over the lake and to meet our responsibility.
It's too late for us to do anything about it after the easements are in place. It's the legislature to do things about it. All the landowners do.
Well, no man's life or property safe when the legislature's in session. That's true. But we ain't going to solve that problem.
We've got a question from the back. This gentleman would like to know if we know the highest the water level has ever risen on Lake Erling.
I mean, somebody in this room would have to answer that. I'm not aware. Mr. Cook, would you know that?
On December 29th, 1987, it went to 38.00. Stayed there about 4 hours, and then went down. 238, went to 38 foot on the gauge, would be the 50-year flood zone. Would be 228. We went to the 228 sea level of that day. About 4 hours.
Okay, we're going to try to get some of the people up front because Chris has been in the back. And okay.
I'd just like to say that I'm Charles Harvard. I've been living on the lake for 17 years, and I'm encouraged about what the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission is trying to do with this lake. The future of this lake depends on it. I think there's a lot of talk and worry about, and a lot of people maybe don't understand. They're not talking about raising the level of the lake. When it rains, it just does that. And we've seen it. We had a trailer over here for 12 years, and we live in our home for 17 years, and I've seen it up and down. And I can see a lot of good things that's going to happen if the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission is allowed to take this lake. And some regulations is not going to hurt anybody. When people build a raggedy dock on the east side, let the pieces fall in the lake, you know where they end up? On my bank. And I have to clean it up. So that kind of stuff needs to stop. There's a lot of sewage water running in the lake. I talked to a man earlier here that paid no attention to the fact that his sewage system needs to be 100 feet back from the lake. And he said, well, I'm an engineer, and it soaks up okay, and it's okay. It's not okay. And we've got plumbers in this area that's installing systems that they don't call an Arkansas designated rep to get the approved system put in. And it happens, and that's not good for any of us. That's destroying the quality of the lake. And I'm encouraged about what these guys are trying to do.
I'm going to go over here because I believe you've already asked one question, so I want to try to get to as many people as we can.
We're looking at, we have 3 choices. I've been here all my life. We have the evil of pulling the gate and letting the lake dry. Or we have the evil of letting the
For definitely anything above 225 in easements, they would not apply.
Okay. Can we have guidelines printed up that we can look at that pertains to us, to our lake, so we know what we're doing if that is printed up is no good for us, if that doesn't pertain to us?
Yes, but I want to be clear, this is a different situation than we ever had. So we still don't know what is going, what types of land use policy we would apply for what we own 225 and below. So I don't want to give you something that now that I've come back 6 months, a year, 2 years now and say, oh, we changed our mind.
No, but before,
I just need you to understand that's a work in progress.
yeah, before we totally
Yes, ma'am.
assume in all this.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we know.
Absolutely, yes. I'm going to recognize this gentleman here.
Yes, I had a couple of things. Actually, I had spoken to an engineer the other day that I thought was quite out of the box. He doesn't live on the lake, and his statement really makes sense to me. He said, when international paper engineers designed this lake, they did a really great job. Maybe over-engineered it. I mean, as far as the dam, it's a hazardous built dam and the spillway and everything, and it's really served us real well. But when they bought it to or obtained up to the 225, it's pretty obvious to anyone that's been on the lake that it does go over the 225 from time to time. Now, I think at that time probably they did not realize that, or they would have obtained to the 228. But his simple explanation for that would have been, and I never heard this before, was maybe add maybe 50% more to the spillway so that the 225 would work now, instead of actually backing water up to the 228. If, of course, that takes money, and I understand that. But the other thing is, as far as, and I got this wrote down so I don't get it. One thing that I think would work for me and some of the people that I know, the guarantor, which is us, reserves and expresses the right to construct, improve, and maintain above the 225 contour line. But guarantor shall not be liable to guarantor for the damages caused by water impounded into Lake Erling below the 228 contour. Could there be something constructed or drawn up so we could sign off that we wouldn't sue you up to the 228 as long as you didn't change the management practices?
In answer to your question, that we're looking at how to write this easement for an as-built lake. And so what you're saying is how we're looking at it, what construction rights would be retained by the owner. And so we haven't concluded that yet. And I hope y'all are being patient. It's as you've heard Commissioner Mahoney and Mr. Armstrong say, this is a dialogue tonight. You can't be expected to sign an easement. We don't have it drafted and ready for you to sign, and we haven't made the final decisions on what to ask you to sign. And you, on the same token, need to have something in your hand and have opportunity to consider it. But again, this is an as-built lake, and we know that, and we're not going to ask for an easement that takes more right than we think we need. All we need is some assurance that, again, when that water does rise, and if you mentioned the spillway being expanded, perhaps that is something that can be looked into. And you're right, it would cost an investment of money to do that. But perhaps that would assure that this lake is not reaching 228 as frequently as it is now, and as our engineer mentioned, FTN did that study, and according to their study on the hydrology, the 100-year flood level at this lake currently is 228. That's what it is. And what I had mentioned earlier about what International Paper put in a deed to other landowners, they had put in that, and I can read it to you. It says that the grantee, which was the purchaser from International Paper, was accepting and agreeing that no buildings except dock piers and boathouses will be constructed on the lands herein conveyed that will have a finished floor level below the federally established 100-year floodplain, as it may be established from time to time, plus 3 feet. So you have to agree in this particular transaction that International Paper said the developer had to agree not to have a floor level that was less than 3 feet above the 100-year flood level. And as best we can tell, that 100-year flood level has been determined to be 228. So when you added 3 to that, a floor could be at 331, and chances are it would not be flooded and would not be damaged. And that was the design criteria. Again, Game and Fish has made no determination as to what to ask or to restrict as far as constructing a house in the between 225 and 228. We're going to go back from tonight and visit with our management and try to make a reasonable, rational recommendation, and then return, and then we would be asking you to, if you would agree to that kind of an easement or not. And if everybody's in the same boat with this lake, that if International Paper were to keep it or transfer it to someone else, I couldn't begin to tell you what might happen. If it was to come to the state of Arkansas, the Game and Fish Commission, we're going to manage it in trust for the public and take into account, landowners, and not try to do anything to you that, we couldn't come back and look you in the eye and say, we're trying to manage this for the public, to everyone's best interest. So I hope you don't go away from this, we're saying we're going to railroad you, we're going to try to condemn land. Please, we're not there. This is just a dialogue. We want your information, and we'll come back and we'll have a proposed easement that we think you can study and determine for yourselves if that's something you can convey. When you convey an easement, you own it. You own the property still. You just gave part of the bundle of sticks that you own. You gave part of that bundle to the grantee of the easement, and you're letting the grantee do something with your property, okay? And you reserve rights for your property. And we would be telling you what we would be asking you to give us. And it would be in black and white. And again, this is for long term, not just for you as the current landowner, but it would apply to all future landowners that you would sell your land to. Okay?
Can I say one thing real quick?
All right, real quick, Ms. Paul.
Okay. You're from Louisiana, supposedly, and been in a flood, so you know along the shoreline there are all kinds of structures. There are whole communities built to 10 foot above surface zone. So we know that you can build within that zone and still own insurance and build whole cities and towns. Thank you.
Thanks. Bear with us, we're going to try to get as many people as we can.
Do you have a time frame of the events that will take place in the process of this change? Do you have a date with IP when
We really don't, and IP's been very patient with us. As Mr. Goodhart and Mr. Oliver both indicated, this is not a simple deal because of the multiple numbers of owners involved. So we're going to move as expeditiously and as quickly as we can, but it will be a matter of years, to be honest with you. It's not going to be 3 months, 6 months, not this year. It'll be years before this is completely consummated and done.
keep using the word easement. Wouldn't it be much simpler if we gave you a hold harmless agreement against flood?
And that's essentially what you're doing.
No, I don't believe it.
But we've used the word waiver, we've used the word
I think
permission.
when you say the word easement, that's a whole lot of, it's got a whole lot of meanings. If we just had a simple, hold harmless of what we got now, we don't have any, who you gonna sue now? And I know my land, it's been up under my porch 2 or 3 times. I haven't sued anybody.
Well, we use the word easement because that is the legal term that we enter in this agreement, that's what you would get, or that's what we would receive. So again, we don't want to fool anybody by masking what's going on here by using something, some other term, permissions, waivers, whatever you want to say. I mean, it used to be in the day that maybe you and I could sit there on your dock and your land and handshake that, you understand water's going to come up on you and you're not going to sue me when it happens. But for this to be, clearly done and transparent, we have to do it in its total legality and transparent fashion. So that's why we use the word easement, because that's what it will be. But in effect, it is your permission for us to put water on there during the normal operation of the lake.
I think the lady just asked the question I wanted. I'll ask you, John, that up to the 228 would be considered public property. What privilege did they give the public to on my property?
It would not be public property, no. No, it would be private property. So if you wanted to post it, keep people off, it's still your right to allow who you want on that property.
I think a lot of the people may like to have a question answered about an article.
Okay. If y'all could be quiet for a moment so everybody can hear the question.
This may be with regard to the land usage policy that you have, but in the Louisville paper about 2 weeks ago, I'm sure a lot of folks read that, and it may have been one of the land usage issues was that the 228 is declared, let's say it's declared, they would be considered another 100-foot horizontal feet from that, and we're going to call it a buffer, and we're going to declare that public property. I bet you a lot of people wonder about it.
Correct. I read that article, and let me say, I don't know if the reporters in this room, but they did not call us when they wrote that article. So we had no input, and had we been, we would have corrected all the errors that were in it, because there were some obvious errors in that article about the application of the land use policy in this situation. But no, that article contained a number of factual errors.
We got a lot of dead trees around Lake Erling, and I wonder who would be responsible there on Lake Erling property, and if they fall on your property, who's responsible for getting them up, or they may fall on your house or storage house or something like that. Who will be responsible for your trees?
I can tell you what we do now. If you own property on one of our game and fish lakes, White Oak or Callion or something, Tri-County, something like that, if the tree is on us and it is threatening your property, we will come take care of it, because it's our tree, it's our responsibility.
Thank you.
I have property on Walker Creek, and our biggest problem is no water in the lake, not flood water. We go for most of the year without enough to even launch our boat. So I'm wondering, what is your management policy on keeping a normal level in the lake throughout the year? That's one of my questions. Another thing that I would like to ask is, let's see, this is a novel idea, but let's say that the people who owned property on the lake could form a homeowners type association to actually own the lake.
would Game and Fish still be willing to work with us to manage the fish and the wildlife in the lake if we could control the dam, the area for access and whatever else needed to be controlled around the edge of the lake? Those are, I guess, two of the things that I would like to know.
Okay, I'm not familiar with your situation, so I don't know at what pool level you start drying out. But in a generalized situation for our lakes, we maintain a pool level constantly throughout the year for access purposes. Fish management, fisheries responds well to periodic drawdowns that in the late summer, generally after the 4th of July, we lower the pool level to 3-4 feet, some area there, and allow that exposed surface area to dry out. We go in and do habitat projects. We may seed it with grass. The fishery population responds well to that. But you got to remember, all of our fish species, bass, crappie, bluegill, they all are native to rivers and oxbows. Lakes are an artificial construct on it. Mother Nature did not build Lake Erling, and so the fish populations are used to more of a fluctuating water level. So we try to mimic that in our lake management. Now we don't do it every year because it's an inconvenience to the public when we draw a lake down. But every once in a while, 3 to 5 years, some routine periodicity, we do artificially lower the lake down. But we try to maintain it at a constant pool level throughout the year for public access and for the health of the fishery. Your second question was the Lake Owners Association. Yes, we would gladly welcome a Lake Owners Association because, again, it's about being good neighbors and good communicators. And we have an organization that we can communicate with, and we know that y'all are talking to each other, then it just makes for much more effective in good relations. So thank you for that question.
Well, I've got a campground on Lake Erling, and I keep my washer and dryer up on cinder blocks because I'm used to the water getting under it. Now, what I'm interested in is, and I think a lot of people, nobody here is really looking to sue anybody. What we're interested in is the lake's coming up, you pull the plug and let the water out, not close the gate and hold everything you can in. That's what we ran into a couple of years ago. They shut the gates and they held everything up in here with us so somebody else downstream didn't flood. We want to know that the spillway is going to left at least at the capacity it's at now, and when the floods come, we know you ain't God, you can't control the rain, but when it comes, we want you to pull the gate open and let it out as fast as it will go out. That's the guarantee we want from your end.
Mark, you going to answer that? Oh, I've had one question occur to me that I'll get that question. I thought Mike was going to answer. We've developed a water level management plan to take all that kind of stuff into consideration. We do it on a lot of our other lakes. We have to deal with that kind of issue on a lot of lakes, and so we try to take into account everything that we can to keep the lake working right, for the fish, but also taking care of people around it and below it. So and the Corps may have something to say about it too, in this lake. I don't know that, but I mean, they originally had the land and their agreements there. We'll tell you what we find out.
That's one thing we want all here back. How are you going to manage the lake?
And we'll tell you what we find out and what they say we have to do and so on and so forth. But one question I want to ask all y'all, because I have been here, y'all know. When IP was running the lake and using water for their bills in Louisiana, what impact did that have on the lake and the fishery? The drawdown? Okay. Well, y'all had raised the question of, commercial use of the water. If there were commercial use of the water, and I know there's going to be demand, I don't know what it's going to be, I don't know who's going to want it, people are going to want it. If it were consistent with that regime that IP used when they were moving the water downstream for their plant, it didn't hurt the fishery, which is our first priority. Everything else being equal, we would then want to recover the cost of running the lake by selling water if we had surplus water. So that's why I'm asking what impact that operation has on the lake.
Well, I appreciate that and understand that. I hope it's, you don't leave here thinking it was a waste of time, because again, we approach this as an information exchange and a dialogue, and we try to be open that right now we can't tell you definitively what that easement would look like. We know what easements typically have in them. We know what we're contemplating. We wanted to get your reaction and your perspective on that, what y'all would want to see as the future of Lake Erling. I mean, if y'all in unanimity said, we don't want the state of Arkansas involved in our lives at all, we would pack up and go back to wherever we live and be fine. I mean, y'all told us that. But so we are still looking for that feedback and that dialogue so that we can move forward. Because again, I get the sense, and the number of times I've been down on this lake, people enjoy it for fishing and for recreation, and they want that sustained and maintained into the future. And that's what we're trying to do as best we can and figure out how to do it so that both parties, us and you, have that understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to move this forward. That's really all we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, I would just like to say, I understand this gentleman's thoughts, but I don't think it's a waste of time. We all need to kind of know what's going on. And we've heard so much, you know, they're going to take it up to 228, that's going to be the normal level. We'd all be in trouble then. And, but I do agree with the gentleman down front. I don't think the game fish is going to try to ruin us. We're managing by ourselves, basically now. Whatever comes on our land, that's what we have to deal with. And we know what level we're in. We do know there's a possibility every 100 years or so it may go, you know, into our homes because we're closer to the lake than we need to be. But I just want you to take a me. I come here and I didn't come with my panties in the water. I come here, I want to know what's going on. And but I'm saying this, if y'all tell me tonight that the $450,000 home I got over that lake and I ain't got no lake no more, I'm gonna tell you, our little bitty greens is worried about our assessments and all. It ain't gonna be worth much. I mean that with all my heart. And so I mean, I don't think they're trying to hurt us, and I don't know when you get the government, the game and fishing, and they start all these rules and regulations, and we don't like that. But we certainly would like it if we didn't have a lake.
Thank you.
While we're between speakers, I just want to thank all y'all for coming out. We have a lot better feel for what's troubling you as a result of being here tonight and hearing what you have to say, and we're going to be able to react a lot better, I think, and clearer now that we've got a better idea of what's about.
Is working? Yeah. Okay. I want to thank Mr. Mahoney for giving me permission to talk. A lot of y'all don't know me, a lot of you do know me. I'm Mark Bryan. I was raised on Lake Erling. Water skied, fished, swam in it, swallowed more of it than I want to admit. And I have a big concern because I have people on both sides of the family that have lots here. And I have a conflict of interest in that I'm also a board member of the Columbia County and Lafayette County Conservation District. And we're the ones, well, first I want to stop and tell you, my cell phone number is 870-904-8030. Anybody wants to call it, I'll repeat it later. Mr. Cook, when was the first time that International Paper Company was offered the game and fish to lake?
Shortly after the mill code.
Back in the late 70s. Okay? And this all has come about since December. And I want to tell you,
conservation districts is we saw this lake, it's not a pig in a poke. We saw it as a 7,000 acre gold mine of resource for this area. We know that it's been managed properly for 56 years without causing a problem that anybody couldn't live with. We have, our interest set shows that water is declining in the Sparta aquifer. People are drilling into the Sparta aquifer for their industry. And we think that surface water, excessive surface water, can be diverted to that use and be a godsend to our area. We need jobs here. We need expansion of existing industries. International Paper Company used the water out of this lake for years without causing a hardship on anybody. It improved the fishery by creating new lake conditions every year. And it's the hottest place one of the hottest lakes in the country for fishing. Despite basically not having much input from Arkansas Game and Fish over those years because they didn't have ownership and it was managed kind of on a benign neglect basis. They did stock fish regularly. They were offered a land for a fishery for this lake in the 60s and they refused it. They've been 20 years having this offer on the table. We went to IP back in December and asked them if they're not going to do anything about it, we would. We see it as a resource that we'd be so honored to manage for our local people. And when that happened, things started rolling. For whatever reason, the Game and Fish offered to meet with us, and we went to the Game and Fish Commission offices in Little Rock, the county judge, Lafayette, Columbia County, the board of members of Lafayette, Columbia County, and we talked to them, and they mentioned the need for these easements over and above what's been there for 56 years. We questioned the need for that easement and wondered why and how could you even accomplish that with all the varied landowners and everything, all the development's been going on in this length of time. They just said, well, it was on the advice of attorneys. And we told them that we expressed a concern that Lake Erling could be more than just a fishing lake. It can be the salvation of our whole area. It's an engine for driving economic development down here in this area. And they told us there would be uses for water coming out of Lake Erling that they wouldn't abide. There's certain industrial uses they could not abide. And so we thought, well, the local people ought to be the ones that decide what uses are good for our area, not somebody in Little Rock. We were asked to submit a proposal to them in 60 days. So we drafted a proposal and started, and we went to a lot of local people, myself, I wrote most of it, but we went to local people and asked for input on it. And sure enough, before we get that draft proposal to the Game and Fish, this meeting was scheduled, and it's their meeting. We weren't going to talk, but Rick Bland mentioned we got limited options. I'm here to tell you we got more options than what's going on, what you've heard so far. We're not invited to this meeting on purpose, I think, because it was really just a hearing, and it's been productive. But I'm going to just tell you that the Game and Fish and their easement requirements and land use policies are not the only option. With your help, we want to strike a balance where Lake Erling just become one more of their lakes and subject to their land use policies, but a lake owned by a locally elected and therefore locally accountable board of directors that can become a magnet for jobs without the intrusion and interference that is inherent with total control of the Game and Fish Commission. Our proposal is for Game and Fish Commission to take a much greater role than they have in the past on the lake and management. We're not convinced that any additional flowage easement should be obtained or even could be obtained. Our proposal is to respect the significant investment made along the shores of Lake Erling over the last 56 years. One only needs to look at neighboring White Oak Lake to get a glimpse of what could happen. This turmoil and upheaval created over there over enforcement of land use policies that had been not enforced for years, that They're the folks that tipped us off to what could be in store for us over here. We have a draft proposal. We don't want to release it to the public until we have a chance to give it to Game and Fish, let them look at it. But I want to emphasize, we don't see Game and Fish as being a bad thing for the lake. We think it's a wonderful thing for them to take an increased interest in the lake. We just think we want the decisions for Lake Erling to be made locally and accountable. And again, my cell phone number is 870-904-8030. Thank you.
Thank you. We did not particularly mention that tonight, and I'm glad it was brought up because it's right that a couple weeks ago, it was back in January, they came to a meeting we had, and there is a proposal in works for a partnership between us and the conservation districts. But I'll repeat what we started with tonight. Our bottom line interest is to keep Lake Erling open as a public fishery with our presence on it to manage it and protect the fisheries assets for the public to use and enjoy. And if there is and I think there probably is a complementary use of the lake that could accomplish both. But tonight the focus was on the easements because that's where we started down this road in our conversation and our dialogue with international paper. It wasn't meant to exclude the conservation districts. That wasn't our intent at all on that one. So, but I appreciate the comments there. And again, as we started out saying, I mean, we're very early into any of this process, and we want to be as open and transparent moving forward as we can be, so that as things change and we begin to look at different proposals or different ideas and concepts, that we can bring them back to you in a form or in a manner in which you would be fully informed of what's taking place here.
Since I'm here making inquiries tonight, this benign neglect kind of bothers me. I've not heard significant criticism of the way Game and Fish has managed the lake over the years. Do y'all have big problems with it? You looking for to do things a lot different? No. I didn't think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, even for that comment. Okay, anybody else? We got 15 minutes left, and if you would, we're going to close this down at 9 o'clock. So if there's a topic that hadn't been covered yet, we'll try to address it. But we have people that have traveled quite a way to be here tonight, and we want to be respectful of that.
I just want everybody to go to the internet and look up the Lafayette Columbia County Commissioners, or whatever they are, and find out what their jobs are. Most of them are real estate agents, and that's what they want to do, is control the real estate, which we already own. So I would be very concerned about the Columbia and Lafayette Commissioners, whatever they are, because I don't like what I see on the internet about them.
Anybody else?
In 2009, our house was one of the houses that had water in it. And in fact, we got it twice that year. My concern is you're saying 228. If that water level was at 27 and it was under our house, 28 is going to put it behind us. That's going to leave me about 20 foot of my land that I can do what I want to with it. And y'all can tell me what I can do with the rest. Is that right?
If you're talking about the amount of property between 225 and 228, it's just we're talking about the flowage easement. Again, we're not telling you what you can and can't do, with the exception that flowage easement is likely to have some restrictions on building an habitable residence on it. Now, if you're already there, we're going to have to come visit with you. We're going to have to deal with it somehow. As Mr. Goodhart said, we'll have to grandfather existing structures, residences, and anything else that's already there into the
But if we got ready to build something later on, we'd have to check with you.
Yeah, I would fashion it this way. What you have experienced now is what you're going to experience in the future. I mean, in the past, going up this point, is what you will experience in the future. We're not looking to change that. We're just looking that you will recognize that whatever damages that you have occurred in the past will continue, and you're not going to blame the Game and Fish for it. The question was, there's not much chance we can lower the lake. No, we don't have any interest in that. Oh. The question was, is there any chance that we could lower the easement from 228 to 227? We'd have to take a look at that, to be honest with you. I mean, the 100-year flood mark is the benchmark that is typically used in flowage easements, so we'd have to assume a greater amount of risk. And again, that would be a decision our commission would have to make if we lowered that to 227. Okay. Not many people, I mean, I can hear you, but not many other people can, so I understand that. Let me get one more question, and then we're going to make some concluding comments and send everybody home. So, Chris, do we have somebody with a microphone? Okay, one more question, and then we got some closing comments, and we'll everybody go home.
On this lake, there are several privately owned landings that are open to the public for commercial use. Will they be affected in any way?
The commercial operations around the lake? On the flowage easement, no. I mean, if they're existing on that place now, we would make some allowance for, our interest is not to change any commercial operation on it. If we should take over the lake and you have an operation or structures on our property, our typical process is to do a permit with you as a commercial operator on state property. And that's, we have commercial operations on several of those lakes, and we recognize that y'all provide a benefit to the lake. We're not wanting to interfere with that operation, but we want, for the safety of the public and for the health of the lake, we'd want to make sure that your operation is physically sound, safe, those types of things, and that you're offering a service to the customers of the lake. But, so again, I mean, you would be a special situation we can discuss afterwards, and we give you examples of commercial operators on our game and fish lakes, and you can go visit them or ask them questions about it, and we can discuss it in that context. But you are a little bit of a different little situation, but no, I don't foresee us, requiring anything inordinate on you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and conclude because it's getting close to 9 o'clock. Mark, did you have anything for that?
First, I want to thank Bradley High School and Superintendent Moore for letting us meet here. All of you for coming and providing real good information to us. We appreciate it. Like Commissioner Mahoney said, we got a lot out of it. I want to thank everyone who came from Game and Fish. And I forgot to introduce Clay Raven, who's the Lafayette County Wildlife Officer, who's very involved with managing the lake and working on the lake. So most of y'all probably know it. We did have sign-up forms, and in fact, we need to get all those. If you could give those to Chris, if you have your letters and you want to turn them into us, we can take those. Any of us can take those. So, and once again, I don't know, England, did you want to? Anybody else have a final comment?
Yeah, just a couple things. Commissioner Mahoney mentioned that we are going to set up on our website a special place for people who want to comment on Lake Erling. Now, it's not, so don't go tonight or tomorrow and start looking for it because it won't be there, all right? Give us a few days to get that set up. But we will we'll have a link on our website where you can go retrieve information and offer our comments. Also, you know, letters, phone calls are certainly welcome. I can't remember our 1-800 number to the Little Rock office. I can remember the regular number, 501-223-6300. But if you get a copy of our turkey regs, our fishing regs, or hunting regs, anything like that, it has our 1-800 number on there. You're certainly welcome to call to ask from me, Mike Armstrong, Mark Oliver. Les Clayton is in the Hope office, so he's only as far away as Hope if you want to visit with Les on this, because again, we're looking and encouraging a feedback. Next steps, obviously, we're going to go back, take what we learned tonight, listen to your other comments that you may submit by mail or phone call or however you get them to us, visit with our commission about how do we move this forward. With, again, the bottom line, we want to keep this open as a public fishery. We had a gentleman here tonight talk about that they're putting together a proposal for a partnership, which would include a larger role for game and fish. We certainly are entertaining that. So there's lots of still things that we have to do and work through. And I want to stress this is not going to be something that's done quick or that we're going to do without as open and transparent a process as we can get. So again, don't expect anything quick to happen. It just won't be that way. But we'll try to be as open and informative as we can. And certainly when we make a decision, or before we make a decision, but we have some certainty, our ideas have gelled into something, we'll come back to this very building or a better place if you think it needs to be bigger and have another one of these dialogues with y'all. So again, thank you and good night.